Welcome to Bat Therapy, the psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness. We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown, and comic enthusiast and nerd aficionado Keaton Hopkins. This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources.
So we are on our last episode of the season. I've loved this
Season
It's been so fun.
finale. If it were an episode of Supernatural, we'd be playing Carry On My Wayward Son, right?
It's true. And we, of course, are hitting on what if, because how do you talk about alternate universes and
Yeah,
Elseworlds and all this stuff without hitting on at least one of the Marvel shows? I mean, we had to do Loki or What If.
right, right. Yeah, and I think this is the perfect way to wrap a season where we talk about Elseworlds. It's a show that is specifically oriented towards Elseworlds. Like, and
Yep.
I also love that, like, even the episode names, it's like, what if dot 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 boom. It's like, ooh, what if that? Like, I really like the way that
Yeah.
it's
Interesting.
segmented. And what's even funnier is they still ended up combining the plot lines, which
Oh, yeah.
I'm not 100% sure if, if I liked or not, but I thought it
They
was
just
funny. I'm
couldn't
like,
help
right,
themselves.
they couldn't help themselves. They're like, oh, fine, bring them all together. We still need this to be the Avengers somehow. I'm like,
I'm with
fine.
you. I was perfectly happy with the separate episodes and
Yeah.
just toying with a change. Because as we've been talking about this season, this is like one of my favorite things to read is okay, so we've got some sort of alternate reality, and what are all the cool little Easter eggy changes that you see?
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the idea of just an anthology and they're all
Yeah.
one-off episodes. I'm really interested in seeing what they do with the second season because the first season had so many good episodes. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
this is really interesting. Of course, I wasn't expecting the zombie episode, but I'm like, yeah, I guess Marvel Zombies is a thing. I just didn't think they'd bring it in so soon, honestly. I
Everybody's
thought,
got to do freaking zombies.
yeah.
I don't know.
So I have to ask, out of all these episodes, which do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite? I don't know. Hmm. I don't know. I do I like the one where all of the Avengers are getting killed off
That was a
because
good one.
I like myself a mystery. Murder mysteries are just kind of my
Oh,
thing.
yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, that was good.
So I think I might have to say that one because you're wondering who done it kind of situation.
That one was really good, and the thing I really liked about it was the big what if. It was all about, Hank Pym just
Yes.
being angry about of, uh the loss of his wife, and it was so cool the way that they did it because I was like, "Okay, how is this happening? The Hulk just exploded? Like, what is going on
I know. It's this whole
right
wait,
now?"
how are they killing off unkillable things? What? Yeah, and that's the thing I love is how much these what ifs and changing things, how much it can completely turn things on their head.
Yeah. I also love that, like, Loki is still, like he's still himself, but he does clearly love Thor. Like, I love that no matter what happens in no matter what universe, Loki is still like, I mean, Thor's my brother, and I'm gonna rough him up, but he's still my brother, and I can't stand him, but I love him. Like, it's it's like a recurring theme. He's like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm gonna kill my brother. I'm here to take over your planet." Like, I just
So I feel like what if the show is what happens in your brain all the time.
Yes,
Because
it is.
whenever we come out of a mindful nerd moment, you describe kind of where your brain goes in a way that these episodes do, where it's you have this one question and all of a sudden you create this entire timeline and this whole depiction of this tiny little change.
Oh, yeah, it's like if chaos theory was a person, I think that yeah, I think my mind would definitely match it because, yeah, I'm constantly thinking about these kind of scenarios, and I really did appreciate it because, but what this show did, I will say, is none of these scenarios were things that I thought about before.
Mm,
Like, I had thought about the zombies episode because there's this series of, books that I read called X Heroes, and it's basically about superheroes, this team of superheroes dealing with the zombie apocalypse. So I thought
uh,
about that before, but I never, like, thought about what if Captain Carter got the serum? Oh my god, I loved it. I love that,
that
and
that I almost said that was my favorite.
I it's one of my favorites simply because of the Hydra Stomper armor. I really loved that. I
It's
was
so
all
good.
about that. It's such a good name. But yeah, like I none of the scenarios were things I thought of before. And yeah, I did love that the what it the that third episode, what if the world lost its mightiest heroes, how
Mhm.
it was like yeah, I love murder mysteries um, are a lot of fun. And it was just really cool because one thing that's fun about Nick Fury is he never loses his focus. Like Nick
Mm.
Fury is and it's something to be admired to a point, but he never loses his focus. Like all of these Avengers bite it, and immediately at the end, he's like, "Well, time to find more heroes."
Yep,
like,
yep,
it's
yep,
like,
he doesn't
yeah,
even blink. I
he's
know.
like, "Where's my beeper? Where's my '90s beeper so I can call Captain Marvel back to Earth and find
Which,
Steve
hey, she'll
Rogers?"
actually come because we don't have any other superheroes anymore, so it all
Right.
worked out.
It all worked
There you
out. It
go.
was perfect. He's like, "Well, all right, and Loki might be taking over the Earth now, but you know what? It's fine. It's gonna be great."
So, uh, what I really like so you were talking about this is an anthology, which I think in some ways can make it kind of hard to talk about in the way we normally talk about things,
Yes.
connecting to the psychology and stuff. But I actually feel like the major themes of the anthology are so it connects so much to psychology and mental health. I find it so interesting because of there are a few things that stood out to me. Um, one of them was just so you've mentioned that you do it, and there are a lot of people who think about, well, what if? What if
Mhm.
this had happened instead? Or what if that had happened instead? And just the idea of how many things in life are interconnected
Mhm.
in such a way that I if life is going well, you might say, well, all of that stuff that went bad in the past is okay because it led to X, Y, or Z.
Yes.
But on
Yes.
the flip side, if life is in a really tough spot, you might look and say, if only this stuff in the past had been slightly different. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to overcome those little things in the past that you see as ending you up where you are now.
Oh my gosh, I deal with that all the time. Like, the number of times where I wanna think about my past and get
Mhm.
like really sad. And then I realized, hey, but if all of that hadn't happened, I would have
Yep.
never met my wife. Or if all of that had
Mhm.
happened, I would have never had my children. And then I'm suddenly fine with it.
Yep.
It's
Mhm.
it's so interesting. And but like you said, it doesn't feel that way until you have something that's like
Yes.
nice. This is cool.
Yeah.
And it's like you just it's kind of like this waiting game where I hope things get better, but
Mhm.
sometimes there's things that happen and it's like, okay, it doesn't really matter. This sucks, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like it doesn't there's some things where it's like, okay, yeah, this will and there's always the person that says it, I feel like way too early, like everything happens for a reason. It'll get
Oh, yeah.
better.
Mhm.
Like it'll oh my god. That it's like worst timing. Don't say that until things are better.
And then wait.
And then
Still
wait.
wait, just to
Right.
give
Don't
yourself an
brag.
extra
Like,
cushion.
don't brag
Yeah.
about it. Right. Like, even when things like, oh, like, yeah, my dog died, but then he hit the lottery. And then as you're holding the check, they come up and say, see, you would have never hit the lottery had your dog survived. It's like, wow. No, I don't want to. I
Well, and
still wish I had my dog back.
it's a really
Right.
good point where a lot of people in recovery, whether it's mental health, substances, etc., a lot of times we'll talk about an appreciation for the struggles they've been through. And that doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily, some people, they might say, yeah, I'm glad I went through it. But for some people, that doesn't mean they're like, oh, yeah, I'm so glad I went through it. But like
Right.
we're talking about, it leads to this other point for ourselves. But you're so right in that that's a really complicated and lengthy process a
Hmm.
lot of the time. And so timing is everything when you're trying to, I think, help a person be able to realize the growth and appreciate the whole process instead of getting stuck on a moment in time.
Yeah.
But it's really tricky. And like you said, a lot of times you have to hold the hope or hold the faith to get to that later point where you can look back and say, okay, there were struggles. They were hard. I didn't love them. And
Right.
yet here I am.
Yeah.
And I was talking to some mental health providers the other day. It was a really cool thing. So we've been working on stigma stuff. And so essentially it was mental health providers talking about their own mental health experiences because sometimes we see it as an us, them. You've got the treatment providers and then the people
Right.
who have the diagnoses, and that's not how it is. And so one of them, was actually sharing about how important it is for us to hold the faith or hold the hope for someone while they're going through these transitions in that process. Because it's so hard when you're in the thick of things to think, I might get to a point where I look back and I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Uh,
that's one of the things that this anthology that it makes me think about.
Yeah, and another thing too is when you look at these scenarios, what's funny is every single episode is set up in this way like, hey, this is the point where everything went bad, right? And
Mm,
that's not how it actually works because so many times even in these episodes it's like, yeah, that first thing right there was or different, but at the same time there were so many other things that caused that
yeah.
to happen as well. It wasn't just, oh, this one thing. Like, it reminds me of back in, like, remember all the memes about how horrible 2016 was and all the crazy things that happened? And 2016 was a rough year. It was a rough year. And all along though, nobody had any idea that 2020 was coming, right? Like, they
Yeah.
had no
Oh,
idea. But
yeah.
back in 2016, they were just like, "Oh my god, this this guy's running for president, and oh my god, he just won, and where did it all go wrong?" And people go and all the theories. That was like, man, the moment that they shot Harambe, everything
Mm.
just everything just went to hell. Or, oh wow, the moment that particle collider went off track, it knocked us into another reality. Like, there were so many different things there, but I'm like, all of those things are completely separate. Like, I don't think any of them are related. It's just when you combine them, it's like, wow, this is this is
Yeah.
not
Oh
good, but
man,
it's
you wanna hear one of my neurotic things?
what?
You made me think of it just now. So I'm higher on the neurotic end of, I'm a worrier and I just can hone it. I can hone it for myself pretty well.
Yeah,
But you're driving down the street and you just kind of, it flashes in your mind, like, what if you got in an accident right now? Or,
right.
you just, for some of us, not everybody's, but some of us kind of have these flashes of, ooh, what if this really bad thing could have happened just now? Or, and part of me goes, oh man, is that me in a multiverse? Like, is this one of the alternate realities for me? Is this one of the splits?
Right.
Wouldn't that be so interesting if all of that anxiety stuff, instead of it, just being annoying symptoms and things you got to work through. It's literally you peeking into one of those alternate realities.
And it's one of those things it's hard to not focus on. It's so hard to
Yeah.
not focus on. And it because I am also that way, and it it does go for me, it will go to a fault. Like, for example, I still have not stepped foot on a roller coaster, and I probably never will, just
Oh.
because I'm like, I look at it as one of these things like, okay, what is it designed to do outside of scare you? It's just only like that's all it
Mm.
does. It just terrifies you. I'm like, okay, so
I'm not a fan either.
it gets my heart racing. It makes my testicles feels like they're inside my chest when it drops. And okay, so what am I supposed to get out of this besides not enjoyment? I'm confused. I'm
So
so
some
confused. And
people really like that feeling. I'm not one of them either, for the
yeah,
record, but some people really love that feeling
and
and they chase
kudos to
that
them.
feeling.
And
Yeah.
kudos to them, but it's always funny because like whenever I go to like an amusement park with friends, it ends up being this thing where they're like, we're gonna ride this roller coaster and
Mhm.
look how terrifying it is, and we're gonna wait in line for 2 hours to ride it. And I'm like, okay, I'll be waiting over at that beer stand
There you go.
for 2 hours. I'll see you soon. This is
Yeah, I
gonna
really
be
only did the
great.
water
Like,
rides.
yeah, the water rides are great. I've always loved the 3D simulators where I
There you
know
go.
this isn't I know I'm in no danger right now. This is great. Like, there's this
Everyone
miss
listening's like, "Oh, you guys are wusses."
right,
Yes,
absolutely,
yes, we are, and
absolutely. That's
proud.
why I read comic books. I take myself away from it. If I had Batman's grapple gun, I wouldn't use it. I would put it in a case. I'm not swinging from a skyscraper. What is wrong with you?
Okay, so I would use it, but in the saddest way possible. I would use it with, like, a two-story building.
There we go. I would you know what? I would how about the ceiling of a one-story building?
There you go. Yeah, I could do
But
that, I
no.
could do
No,
that.
but I am, I can definitely be that way, and it's one of those things where it's I wouldn't necessarily call it pessimistic because I don't go through life thinking the worst thing is
Mm,
gonna happen, but I do think about what is the worst thing that could happen.
yep, yep,
Right? Like, I do constantly think about that, and I think in this day and age, it gets like, it can be so much worse for you. Because, for example, I mean,
mhm,
if I go into a public place, I'm, like, looking around because
mm,
there's so many things like mass shootings that happen and
yep,
terrorism and things like that that just constantly happens. It's like, how do you not think about
mhm,
that? And but you also have to make sure not to worry yourself to the point there where that like you don't even enjoy yourself. Like, okay,
yes.
I'm gonna go to this food festival this weekend and it's gonna be great. And it's like, oh, but what if there's this thing that happens? What if something horrible happens? It's like you have to make sure to r- n- not tread that line so hard that you just don't enjoy anything, right? Um,
And you're hitting the nail on the head with a lot of anxiety, especially if people have some sort of trauma where they've gone through one of those worst case scenarios.
yeah,
And I couldn't say it better myself, where we can we can never be 100% safe.
yeah,
You I mean, you can lower the probability of certain things happening, but then you're probably increasing the probability of other things happening.
right,
So I never leave my house. Okay, well, the odds decrease in terms of a mass shooting out in public. But there's a lot of bad things that can happen in your house, and a lot of bad things that can happen if you say don't move around enough because you essentially trap yourself in your own house. And so there's always risk in life. What's worth the risk? And you're right. It's tough because we were talking about the man. You could look back and regret things and wish they were different. Um, if certain good things happen in life, we stop questioning those things as much. But it's hard. It's hard to know when is it worth pressing through, taking the risks, and realizing life is chaotic to a certain extent. You can't we try and see it as a super black and white predictable thing, and it's just not. It's going to
Yeah.
throw curveballs at you every which way. So, how do you get through it as best you can?
Honestly, and it how to get through it, you just I think that one of the big things is just to part of it is doing what you need to do to make yourself feel safe. Like, I
Mm,
think there's nothing wrong with that. It's like how we were talking about, roller coasters, right? Like,
mm,
I have friends that ride roller coasters. I have friends that love roller coasters, and they're completely okay with me
yep.
not riding roller coasters. Well,
Hmm.
some of them are. You know who you are. Thank you to you. Thank you to only the people that are fine with me being happy on the ground. But the rest of you,
So here's what I will say. Yes, and
okay.
so, and actually, a big part of the work I do with folks is I tend to work with people who their mental health has gotten to a point where it is every day affecting their ability to function in a quote unquote normal way. Being able to do the basic things in life to get through and to be able to enjoy it even. And so it's a constant balance between. Absolutely. You can't be fighting the good fight and putting yourself in a bunch of uncomfortable situations and pushing yourself to limit all of the time. So yes, what are things that you can do to essentially help yourself feel comfortable, safe, etc. And be careful of safety behaviors because what you can do is you can end up making yourself gradually less and less able to be comfortable with things. So, for
Like
example,
overcorrecting.
overcorrecting, exactly. So, there's a difference between I don't like roller coasters. So, I hang out with my friends, they do this, I do these other things, da da da, versus I hate roller coasters to the point where I won't even take that exit off of the highway because I know that there are roller coasters down that way. And
Oh, wow.
that I'm sure that sounds pretty extreme, but if if something worries you to a large enough extent, it can get pretty bad. And you
Especially if
can
you've
get
had a bad experience.
especially if you've had a bad experience. And so um yes, it's about how can I make myself comfortable, but it's also how do I not paint myself into a corner essentially.
Yeah. And honestly, and I think the way to get around that is like I think it's like you said, I think it's it takes a lot of self-awareness.
Oh yeah.
I think it takes a lot of self-awareness. And honestly, who if there's someone with you in this, a lot of communication. Um
Yes. Mhm.
which makes me think about another what if episode, the what if T'Challa became Star-Lord. They
Mm.
could easily
Oh my god.
they could easily call that episode what if Star-Lord was a mature and good communicator because like,
Oh my
like
god. I just love how Thanos is like, "Yeah, I just decided not to do that."
yeah, he's like he made me see a better way. He just talk to me. Like everyone, like Star Lord is just this,
It's
like
wild.
T'Challa Star Lord is just this best person ever. That one's probably that one's probably my favorite episode because it's just like, oh, how did you do that? It's like, oh well, I just talked to him. I just
Yeah,
talked to him
yeah.
and it went well. And like everyone, but like he's just beloved all around. And it's
Mhm.
because honestly, it just seems like he is a great fighter and he's still a badass and he's still cool and all. But people love him because of how well he just kind of breaks things down and communicates with
Yep.
people and he's not abrasive. And it kind of makes me I was honestly watching it and I was like, make a good therapist, I think.
I
like
think so. Yeah.
that was my first I was like, I feel like he would make a good therapist. Like this is really Like, he's just like, the fact, like, when Thanos was like, "My idea is good, but I guess his was better." Like, he just simply talked to him like, "Hey, listen, what if?" Right? And and
Yep.
and and but that's what I love about it, because sometimes the big what if is someone getting you to see a different scenario. Like, "Hey,
Yeah.
I know you're seeing this negative thought, but what if
Mhm.
it could be better?"
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Because it's so easy to focus on the negative, but it's sometimes difficult. Like, "Hey, but what if this could be great? What if this could
Yeah.
be the best thing ever? What if this could be the best trip ever, instead of me being completely terrified to get on an airplane, or completely afraid to be in this crowd of people about to get on that train? What if
Yes.
this could be the best moment and a highlight of my life?"
And that is key. So, especially if you've had bad experiences in the past, especially if they're traumatic, or if you have some sort of mental health condition like depression or anxiety, your brain, it automatically tends to go negative, and it highlights the negative stuff around you much more easily, and it tends to really get caught in that. And you're totally right. Someone who doesn't struggle with those same sorts of things, it's not necessarily they're not thinking of the potential negatives that could happen, but they might be, like you're saying, balancing it out with, hey, what are the positives that could happen? And
Right.
so hopefully coming to more of a kind of realistic middle of, okay, so this could happen over here and that would really suck, but this could happen and it'd be really awesome. And there's a lot of stuff in between, and hopefully we lean toward the more positive end of things.
No.
But totally. And I also, what I really like about these episodes too is, like you were saying, it's not just, hey, this one thing changes, right? But this one thing changes and it changes all these other things. And one of the other themes I feel like you see is that it's it's not all good, it's not all bad, it's just different. So, like,
Right.
T'Challa, okay, he fixes Thanos for goodness sake, but then Ego comes in at the end and he's like, hitting up his son who now isn't, flying around space, and so that universe is still potentially screwed, but
Right.
for an entirely different reason. And
Right.
so I think it's also, I like how they play things out, because it's also just a reminder too that, let's say that you did change something and you think you fit, like, we plopped into Chala, you plop in the best person. Something's inevitably going to nothing is always good and perfect.
Like,
It's
the
going to
yeah.
just be different.
Honestly, it that kind of goes into the Doctor Strange episode, right?
Oh yeah.
Because
Yep.
he actually was able to go back and play out all
Yep.
of these scenarios, but it just so happened this was a moment in time that was out of his control,
Yeah.
and he
Yep.
ended up destroying his world trying to be in
Yes.
control. And it was a really, really interesting, but very it was a heartbreaking episode. It was, because he
Yeah.
was doing everything he could to keep his girlfriend alive. He was doing
Yeah.
everything he could to keep her alive, and no matter what, it was so bad, because it was like, okay, there was a wreck, or there was food poisoning, or there was a shooting, there was always something, and it was like,
Mhm.
okay, the point that I got from it before it even wrapped was, there is no 100% way to keep yourself safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if
Or the people you love say.
Right, because even in that example, it was like, at one point he even had a scenario where they didn't even leave the bubble. They were like, "You know what? Let's
Yep.
not even go out." And it still did
Yep.
not work out. And I think it was good, because it's like, there is a part of your life where it's like, okay, I do, like, I can maintain my circle of control,
Mm.
but at a certain point, you cannot maintain that stuff that's outside of it, right? Like,
Yep.
you have your circle of control, but that circle is where it stops. There are some things that are
Mhm.
outside of your control. You can't stop a hurricane. You can run
Yep.
away from it, but you're not going to stop it. You're not going to stop that tornado.
Yes.
You're not going to stop a a a hailstorm. There's certain things that you can't stop. You can't make your kid get a good grade on that test, right? Like you want them
Mhm.
to. You want and you can do everything in your power. You can get them study lessons, you can hire the best tutors, but inevitably it's out of your control. You can do as much
Yep.
as you can, but you can lead a
Yes.
horse to water, you cannot make them drink, right?
And
Um,
so in psychology, we talk about locus of control. And absolutely, one of the things that people can really struggle with, just in general, is we want to have control. Like I
right,
was saying earlier, we want things to be predictable and we want to be able to have control. And you see, like you said with Doctor Strange, what happens when you try and have too much control and you try and control things that just aren't possible for you to be able to, like you said, you can influence, but you can't force.
right.
And so we can get stuck essentially wearing ourselves out trying to force change with things that we don't have control over.
Yeah,
And a a lot of the things with this show I thought was interesting. And I like to see things a lot of times as a balance between two different kinds of therapy, or theoretical orientations. Like one is cognitive behavioral therapy, and they tend to focus on what are your thoughts, what are your behaviors, how can you change and adjust those. Essentially, how can you manipulate things so that you're thinking about things in a better way, a more realistic way, and how are you like going and doing things in your life based on that. And then there's acceptance and commitment therapy, which focus on things like mindfulness, which we hit on every week, um, living based on your values, and essentially accepting that there are things you cannot control in life. So, how do you find a way to, instead of fighting those things and using up your energy fighting it, like Doctor Strange, how do you find a way to accept the things you don't love about life? Not saying that you feel great about it, but okay, these are what they are. Instead of trying to fight things you cannot change, you can then use that energy on the things you do have some sort of control over and use it to feed a life that you actually want to live. And so this balance of sometimes there's stuff to change and we should change it.
right,
And then don't put all your energy trying to force something that's not going to change. Try
right.
and put that energy into something that can actually be fed and grow into something positive.
And, as a therapist, I know that has to be hard sometimes, especially when you get all of the information. Because my first thought is like when someone, like, for example, if someone says, "Hey, I have anxiety," and it's like, okay, what is it that triggers it? Oh, well, when I'm arguing with my spouse and they yell at me and throw something at me, like it causes me anxiety. And they're trying to get help for their anxiety when in reality,
Mm.
they might be in a very abusive
I was going to
situation,
say, you should
right?
be anxious if something's getting thrown at you.
Right, right, and, like, I feel like that probably like, that's something where I think we as people, we tend to find a way to blame ourselves
Mm.
before blaming someone else, and it's like,
It
"Okay,
depends.
yeah,
It depends, but
it
you're
does
right. A
depend." You're
lot of
absolutely right, it does
so
depend.
s-
That's just
so
me. That's
so
just me, I blame myself.
well, it's not just you. There are a number of people that internalize.
Yeah,
So they take on more control and responsibility that might be helpful. And there are some people that might externalize and then they put that responsibility on others maybe more than is helpful. And usually it's a combination of the two.
right,
So it's not your fault if someone's throwing stuff at you. And unfortunately, the odds are that we have people listening who are in relationships that might not be safe,
right,
and keeping in mind that anxiety is not always your brain making something up. Sometimes it is an understandable and necessary response to a
right,
situation at hand.
right,
Um, but yeah, the you know it can be tricky because sometimes it's even hard to know when is this a response that makes sense given the scenario, and how do I listen to it versus my brain is taking something and running away running away with it, and
Yeah.
how do I make adjustment? And it can take some time to figure that out in therapy. Sometimes it's helping someone kind of work through that.
Uh,
Because we also don't have all the answers. We're not watching everything that person has going on in their lives. So, we've got to be careful we don't make assumptions.
and I would think that, like, whenever you're in those situations like that, if you have a chance to, like, retrospect and, like, take a look at that situation, I think it's a time where what if scenarios might be a
Mm.
good thing. Like, "Hey,
Oh yeah.
what if I wasn't with this person?" Or, "What
Mhm.
if I wasn't around that angry dog? Like, how would this have turned
Mhm.
out? Like, is this an issue that is on me, or could it potentially be that I'm in the wrong environment, or I'm in
Yeah.
the wrong
Oh,
situation?"
you're about to
Right?
get me on one of my soapboxes.
Soapbox away.
One
Put
so
on a
one of
cape.
the really there we
Put
go.
on your
Yeah, I have my cape
soapbox.
on.
Yeah.
One of the really frustrating things for I think I can speak fairly confidently, many of us who are mental health professionals right now is there's all this talk about a mental health crisis, at least in the United States, this huge mental health crisis that's happening. And in some respects, it's true in that there are high rates of mental health symptoms and diagnoses and struggles that people are having. But it's also very frustrating because uh, a lot of this ain't mental health, folks.
Yeah.
It's the environments.
Yeah.
And while that can increase the potential for these diagnoses to happen, you have to pay attention to that because sometimes there's brain chemistry going on. Sometimes there's kind of learned experiences and things, and you're wanting to help a person kind of readjust themselves and shift their brains. But it's kind of like let's talk about a potentially abusive relationship since that came up earlier. If someone is in an abusive relationship and they go around and they're jumping at every sound, they're looking all around them, and they're just seeming on edge wherever they go, of course they are. And
Right.
you can't treat those symptoms very well if they're still in that environment where that's actually what needs to happen for them to stay safe.
Yeah.
It's the body and mind's way of trying to adapt to the situation at hand.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately there's a lot of cultural and systemic things and environmental factors that are still a problem happening. And so calling it a mental health crisis, um having someone go to therapy is not going to fix the system.
Right.
So, yeah, you got me on my little
Right.
soapbox there.
Yeah, like, you might not have a mental health issue, you might just have a horrible boss, right?
Yeah, you might have a horrible boss and a horrible system that
Right.
doesn't care about you, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky stuff. But
Yeah.
so there is one more thing that I wanted to make sure we talked about with what if.
Okay.
The Watcher.
Oh, oh, wow. Oh, yes, the superpowered fly on the wall.
Super powered fly on the wall.
W
I love the Watcher. There's this quote from him. I swore an oath. I cannot exert my will on the natural order of things. I cannot intervene. And
I
of
go
course,
back and forth.
of course, he does end up intervening theoretically because the rules change because an entity can actually see him and then bridges the multiverses. So I think that's the
Right.
excuse for
He
the
came
change.
after
But
him. He's like, "Okay, I now I have to, but it's because this guy showed up in my world. Like,
yeah, like I said, the balance between
minding my own
sometimes
business."
yeah, sometimes you have to accept things as they are and allow them to be, and then other times it's time to act.
Right.
And yeah, so this is why I love The Watcher because I feel like he's that eternal struggle for mindfulness of how do you watch these worlds unfold that inevitably he clearly cares about. And yet
Right.
no matter if it's a bad thing happening, don't intervene. Or if it's a good thing happening, don't intervene. And
Yeah.
just staying the observer. That's gotta be so hard.
Right. It would yeah, it definitely is. It kinda reminds me, like, going back to, like, just being a being a teacher. like being
Mm,
a teacher, and you want all of your students to do well, and
yeah.
sometimes they have to learn hard life lessons, and if you don't give them that grade that they actually earned, it's like, ugh, I hate
Mm,
seeing you so upset. I hate seeing you hurt, but you I have to this I have to do things right, because
yeah.
otherwise you're never going to learn. Like, it's the same thing when you have a child and you have to watch them fail sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because the other what that's just going to learn, because you can't because if you intervene too much, you become a crutch, and
Yeah.
you become a hindrance. And so I understood when he's like, I can't intervene,
Mhm.
because in his mind it's this idea of free will, and
Yeah.
my job is to watch this play
Yeah.
out. It kind of reminds me of like the idea of deism, where it's like an all-powerful God that did
Mm,
create everything, but he's like, I'm not going to intervene. I'm just going to
yep.
watch, because you have ultimate free will, and I'm way up here and I have a
Yep.
great set of binoculars. And that's where it stops. And
Well, and I
that's,
think
yeah.
I think you hit on a good thing. So the Watcher, when free will was essentially getting taken away, or the ability for these multiverses to be what they were meant to be started getting taken away by another one, which I guess you could argue, but wasn't that meant to be if it happened? I don't know. You can spin yourself in circles here.
Right. This isn't
What
a
is free will
philosophy
versus things
podcast.
that were just going to happen? Yeah, I mean, it is a whole thing. Um, but yeah, absolutely that. And once again with therapy, very important too, especially um the more folks are struggling with the day to day, the more support they might need.
Yeah.
And at the same time, what you said is key. One of the things we really have to be careful of is don't become a crutch when someone doesn't need it. So I
Yes.
always like to think of it as, so I broke my foot once, and I'd start with crutches, and then I had a walking boot, and then I had to wear a shoe for a month, and then I was fine. If I'd stayed on crutches forever,
Would never gotten better.
even though my foot was healing, I would have had a whole host of other problems. I
Right.
wouldn't be able to use that leg anymore because my muscles would have atrophied. I would have super bulky, strong arms, but probably a lot of chafing under the armpits. And, like all these other things would happen. So you're totally right. But when you've got like the deity up above and then you have everybody in the universes, uh, uh, it if you find out about that watcher up there, that would be pretty hard to swallow, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And it's it's funny because one of the things I laugh at is the idea of a multiverse and how infinite they are. Like, the Watcher, like how boring most of it must be. Like, he's looking at 75 different multiverses, and the only difference is tonight I went to Taco Bell instead of McDonald's, or Wings Over Greenville, or I went to
So maybe
Sbarro's and
maybe
got a
he's like,
slice of
"Oh, thank
pizza.
God Ultron is trying to take over.
Right,
Finally
right.
something's happening."
That's for season 2, right? That's for season 2. Because, yeah, it's like, but at the same time, like, that goes back to how you can't, like, when bad things happen, you can't try and focus on where things went wrong. All you can do is
Mm,
try your best to learn from whatever the situation is and move forward, right? Because you will really, really trap yourself in a bad place, focusing on, like, trying to find this point where everything changed, right? Like,
yep.
Back to the Future, like Biff Tannen's 1985. Like, oh no, he got the this is where, like, that one was clear. Like, it went wrong
Yep.
because he got the almanac and everything went horrible. But at the same time, even after he got that almanac, I'm fairly certain there were something there were other decisions made that led to
Yeah.
that horrible 1985, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
there
Just
was
having a bunch of money doesn't create all, like
someone neglected, like, right? Like, he got so much money that just garbage is in the street. Like, no, no, I'm not buying it. The school burnt down and no one rebuilt it. Like, what? Doesn't even make any sense. Like, what are we talking about right now? And that's an
Uh,
exaggeration, but at the same time, it's really important not to focus on those points because it puts you in a situation of helplessness. Like, well, I can't move forward because back I broke my arm back then and it ruined my baseball
mhm.
career and now I don't do anything. And it's like, no, you should do something. Like
But
there's
it can
other
be really hard.
it can
People
be.
get stuck.
It
It's
I've been stuck.
it
Absolutely.
yep.
It's brutal.
It's brutal. And I'm highlighting this not because I don't think you know. I know that you know, and I
Right.
think it's just a reminder. This is not us saying like tisk tisk. How dare some people out there
Absolutely
who are
not,
listening
and
get
I'm
stuck?
sorry if it
It's
came
more
off
of
that way.
a, I, I, you know,
Yeah,
that's obviously not what you meant. But once again, we pull for that negative when we're in a bad space. So just to reiterate, so it's perfectly clear, it's hard. You can absolutely get stuck, but hopefully there are actually some like pretty poignant messages in What If. Who knew?
right. There are, and
Don't become Doctor Strange.
yes, don't become Doctor Strange, and there's also nothing wrong with having a backup plan.
There you go.
Right?
Yep.
Because I mean,
Yep.
the Watcher, like the entire time, like he was like, okay, I don't know what to do. Actually, I'm gonna bring them all together. All of these
There you go.
alternate universes, and even Doctor Strange, who wrecked his world and his reality,
Mm, great
in the
point.
end, he still had a very important role to play, and he had
That's a very great
a
point.
a very a very important purpose where things would have been even worse
Yep.
without him, even though all of that
Yes.
horrible stuff happened, right?
So let me rephrase what I said. Some people might end up falling into it real deep and
Right.
become the Doctor Strange. And if that's you, there is still a path forward.
There's
If
still
you
a
feel
path
like,
forward.
nah, I'm Doctor Strange, it's too late. It's not too late.
Yeah.
Even he, like you said, even he had a path forward with the Watcher. That's a great point.
I loved
I
it.
like that.
I did love that they brought that around and it was like,
Yeah.
"Hey, look, you're 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 still a good guy. Like you
Yeah.
are." Like and it I it
But then
yeah.
also the Watcher brought in Killmonger, and I was like,
I
that
don't
seems like a
y that was
mistake.
excessive. I'm like, "You watched all of that. Like, why?" Like, you saw all of his manipulation.
But
Like,
Doctor
you
Strange was not a mistake. Killmonger,
that one yeah, that one was bad. That one was really bad. I was like, I don't know if you needed him for this team, but at the same time, wasn't there like a point though? Like, wasn't it something like if he hadn't brought on Killmonger, like something else? I feel like there was something
maybe
there.
that's what it is.
Like there was some kind of
Yeah.
purpose for
Okay.
even
That
for
that
him being
sounds like
there.
all right, all right, all right,
Yeah,
all
I
right.
can't remember, but I feel like there was something I'm missing. Y'all listening, let us know. Like, yeah, blow us up on YouTube or something. But yeah, it was yeah, What If is really good, and it really, really makes you think. I'm really excited about the second season. I think the second season, the first episode is like, what if Captain Carter fought the Hydra Stomper? Like, I guess it's a reality where the Hydra Stomper is a villain. So,
Oh.
yeah, but right. I guess does that do we have a mindful nerd moment to wrap this season?
Yeah, we do. I I was actually when it came to What If, I was like, okay, mindful moment. Oh, duh. The Watcher. You literally have someone trying to practice mindfulness all of the
Oh
time.
wow, that's a good point.
Yes.
What he
So
does.
he's the epitome of the observer of things. So I actually think this is a really cool character for because sometimes it's helpful to kind of think of an example of how to do mindfulness.
Yes.
So you're a scientist and you're looking at yourself through the microscope, or your life is your experiences and things happening for you is like it's on the stage and you're part of the audience. A way to try and help someone get the sense of, let me create kind of a step back and I'm observing these experiences. And just like the Watcher, so there are things that are happening that he's probably not thrilled about. There are things that are happening he's probably very thrilled about, and a lot of things that are boring, like Taco Bell differences.
Mhm.
Uh, and trying to allow for all of that to be and, notice your reactions to it, but don't change it. Allow it, accept it, be willing to have all of these different experiences and things happening once again, so you're not, wasting energy unnecessarily. So we're going to be the watcher.
Yeah.
Okay. So sit comfortably wherever you are. And if you're comfortable with it, and it's safe, of course, close your eyes. Otherwise, you can just, not focus on anything in particular in the room. Soften your gaze. And as we usually do, just focusing in on your breath, noticing what it's like to breathe in and out. Using this to help you focus in for this mindful nerd moment. And when you're ready, I want you to imagine that you are the watcher. Here you are with an infinite number of multiverses that are happening around you. And I want you to practice focusing in on different multiverses and just different moments happening there. And I want you to purposefully allow yourself to see a variety of different things that might not bother you at all, and other things that you might be tempted to change, but you're not going to. You're going to stay the watcher. Maybe you notice Captain Carter getting the serum. Maybe you notice Tony Stark dying. Maybe you notice zombies taking over the world. Maybe you notice T'Challa talking to Thanos and creating peace. And let your mind wander to a few other what ifs, maybe from the show or maybe something you're just curious about. Imagine what that might look like. And remember, you are the watcher. Take a moment to just notice that scene without changing it, without trying to shape it in any way, just observing it from beyond the multiverse. And when you're ready, we're going to shift away from the watcher, but I want you to take one more opportunity to observe and allow yourself to essentially flip through the different multiverses, seeing snapshots of different characters. Some of them happy, some of them sad, some of them angry, some of them scared. I want you to see growth, destruction, and flipping through all of them. Once again, as the watcher, the observer, not changing them, but noticing and appreciating each moment as important and necessary for the infinite multiverses. When you're ready, take a few deep breaths as the watcher and shift to taking a few deep breaths as you. We're going to move away from the multiverses and back to where you are seated in this moment. Now, when you're ready, open your eyes and we will wrap up the podcast. So I recognize this might be one that your imagination could have run far, far away from you. Um, but how was it?
You don't know me. You don't know me at all. Don't tell me what to do. It was good. My mind did run away because but at the same time, like whenever my mind runs away, it's still relaxing. Like whatever, like if I'm in a
Mm.
stressful situation, like temporarily thinking about a million other things, it could be it could be nice. Like the watcher, like my first thought was, okay, like he's watching all of the multiverses.
Mm-hmm.
How? how does he pick one? Like, how does he know? Like, is there an asterisk mark that says, "Hey, this is the change." Like, this is the change for this one. Like, and like, I would just sit around thinking, like, what if, I got a pretzel instead of a hot dog? Where would my
Hmm.
life be? Right? Like, it's like I don't,
Yep.
like I wouldn't even know what multiverse to look at. But I think it's a fun scenario, just the idea of all of the what ifs. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's
And
definitely
also,
next to a rabbit hole.
yep. Well, and thinking of it the opposite direction too. Let's say you start going down that rabbit hole with your own life. We were talking about what happens if you start down the Doctor Strange path. Trying to remember the watcher. And okay, well, let me try and instead of being me in my multiverse, let me try and shift into being the watcher, observing what's happening to me,
Right.
right? So using this as kind of an analogy to help say, okay, how do I step back a little bit, create a little space?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, the purpose of mindfulness is to approach things with interest. Granted, some distraction happens at times, and that's okay.
Right.
Um, but it is about trying to be interested and not just in the good things or the, creative or interesting things, but also, the things we might see as bad or we don't want to happen.
Right.
The watcher watches those things too.
True.
Thanks for nerding out with us.
I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown. Find me on social media at Crafting the Mind.
And I'm comic enthusiast and professional nerd Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JBS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. See you next week, same bat time, same bat channel.